the act of summer is not just getting to that fruit and getting to the abundance. It's also recognizing that every day that you allow yourself to slow down and be still and be in your practice, you're creating spaciousness to bloom regardless of outcome.
Welcome to SoulPod, where science meets mysticism and your inner wisdom leads the way. I'm your guide, Crystal Cassidy, and together we will bridge the seen and the unseen, science and spirituality, the practical and the profound. From quantum physics to energy centers, near-death experiences to extraterrestrial contact, join us as we delve into the mysteries of consciousness and journey together towards a more awakened, compassionate, and soul-connected world. Find your seat, drop in, and let's go on a journey together.
Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of Soul Podcast. Linda here with Kat. We are just the two of us today, and we're going to be diving into all things energetics of summer, because summer is not just about doing, it's about receiving what's already been planted. And this can be kind of tricky for us to really drop into, especially following the excitement and the freedom and the joy and the blooming of spring. But we really want people to understand that, yes, it's energized, yes, it's social, yes, it's all of these things, but there are amazing ways that you can work with this energy to not only expand your spiritual practice, but also manifest the life that you want to be living. So welcome, Kat. Are you ready to get into it?
Yeah, hello. Excited to be here and talk all about summer energetics.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like your summer has been kind of a 180 of mine, like a direct mirror opposite. So it'll be interesting to dive into the ways that even though you're in a very busy season, a very change season, a very shifting season, there's still this element of receiving. First of all, let's talk about what energy are you feeling as we move into summer? What's going on? What has been coming up for you?
Yeah, well, to kind of echo a little bit of what you've touched on, it's been a container for and an invitation to slow down in some regards, despite how so many aspects of my life are shifting and speeding up. But it's been an invitation to, amidst the change, amidst the movement, to give myself permission to bask in the energy of summer, which is heat, which is cold plunges, which is, being out in the sun and also monitoring like how much you're out in the sun, the exposure. Like there's so many different moving pieces to summer. And I feel like I used to be such a like summer baby. And now I'm realizing, although I love summer, I thrive so much more in the spring and also in the winter. Like those seasons feel so easy to me and so just like natural for me to lean into those different seasons. But summer, it is harder for me to decelerate. It almost feels counterintuitive. It's like days are long, so you should be the most productive, when in reality, it's like that's not necessarily what our bodies are craving. That's not necessarily what the universe is asking of us. And so I think being able to navigate the nuances of that is where our practices come into play, where that stillness comes into play, to be able to discern where should I be exerting energy and where should I be not overexerting energy.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel like it's, I hope that the big takeaway with this episode as we go into the energetics and then also the spiritual practices that you can bring into summer is that it's not about pushing, it's about harvesting. And I think about, when you're gardening, a lot of times you'll have crops that come up in the middle or the end of summer, like corn is a great example of it. In Michigan, there's a saying that's knee high by the 4th of July, which is saying that your corn is supposed to be up to your knee height by the 4th of July, by the middle of summer. But when you think about it too, there's nothing you can do except hope that that ends up happening. Like after you've planted the seeds, between planting the seeds and harvesting the corn at the end of the summer, there's simply nothing you can do to make it grow faster. And you're certainly not going to dig it up to make sure that it's growing. That's what I think is so beautiful about summer and about sinking into this energy of stillness, even if you're in a state of transition, even if you're like about to start a new school or moving to a new city, or in your case, moving to a new house, there's still that need to work with what your body is calling for, which is siestas and slowing down.
Yeah, yeah, what comes up for me is, like, the ability to receive, like, what's coming up for me is that summer is just such this gift, you know? It's this
Yeah.
little it doesn't last that long, and it feels like it's the season that everybody, in a sense, like, waits for. It's like, "Summer's here," you know? 'Cause
Yeah.
there's this air of, like, magic to it, like summer love and vacation and just, like, anything can happen, you know? And there's this air of possibility to it, and in that, like, in it being this gift, like, you hunker down in winter, you make it through whatever 6 months of, like, cold and dark in some parts of the world, and then, you open up to spring, and then you get dropped into summer, and if we don't realize that we've been gifted this time, that we have
Yes.
this few months in the year to really, like, tune into our aliveness, to harness our abundance, to really step into that, then it just floats by and we're not receiving the gift that we're given of
Yes.
this of long days and sunshine and connection and, again, aliveness and possibility. I just, yeah, want to, name that and give us all permission to look at where we're, bulldozing past the gift of basking and just simply, being alive in this time of the year.
Yeah, which doesn't mean that we have to stop doing, right? Like how do we find that balance of, life is forcing us forward, life is moving forward, even in the summer heat, even in the desire to slow down. But it is interesting
Mhm.
how it's different than in the winter, we're tunneling inwards, we're reflecting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do working with those energetics differ, the difference between winter energy versus summer energy, even if both are kind of a forced, maybe not forced slowdown,. A receiving,
Yeah.
What are
Yeah,
your
that
thoughts?
nuance there. Yeah, I mean, for me, like I said, winter comes so easily for me. Love introspection. I can easily be a hermit and just be like, inside my little nest and be like,
Yeah.
I'm so content.
Don't we
But
both have a moon in Scorpio?
yeah,
That's why, yeah, that's it.
yeah, I love it. Just being
The
like all like
scorpion crawls into
emo and
fold, yeah.
broody and just yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like
and
scuttling to
snuggling
my
up, like,
cave.
under
Yeah.
things. Yeah, totally, same. So much of an invitation, like, in our spiritual journey is to turn back to nature and to
Yeah.
witness how nature interacts with itself, the seasons, the cycles, how trees and plants interact with that. And
Yeah.
so the winter is this opportunity to take inventory of everything that's the year prior, the prior harvest, and then take inventory of what's come and where do I need to tend to? What part of me needs, is feeling called, do I feel called to tend to? And for me, yeah, that looks a lot like, staying in, journaling, all the things.
Yeah.
And then summer is so much more, it's interesting. Again, it's that nuance. It is tending. Like, I just planted a garden in our new house, and it's
Amazing.
been such an interesting process because I planted all these, like, not seedling. Well, they're
Yeah.
seedlings, not actual seeds. They're like, you
Yeah.
buy them a little bit sprouted. And I put them in the ground, and the next day I'm like, okay, so, like, where are my tomatoes?
Yeah.
And realizing, like, okay, they're like my babies. I'm tending to
Yeah.
them every day. I'm watering them and, like, sussing out which plant needs how much water and which one's not thriving. And so it's that same energy of tending, but also in the way of tending to the seeds that we've planted in spring, knowing
Yeah.
that we will reap the abundance of what we've planted. So even in SoulPod, we did so much work in our community, in our newsletters, and in that forum of discussion around, like, blooming and what it means to
Mhm.
plant seeds and tend to that soil and water and trust that the seeds are planting roots into that soil and that they'll take time to break through the dirt and eventually,
Yeah.
blossom and then eventually bear fruit. And so
Mhm.
it feels like it's that nuance of tending and receiving and trusting that abundance is inevitable. That abundance
Yeah.
is, it's a guarantee. If you're tending to the plants, if you're tending to the soil and watering, it's a guarantee that you will reap fruit. And
Yeah.
so surrendering into that and really sitting in that trust and using that gift of aliveness, this chapter as an invitation to do what lights you up, to really get clear on what is that spark. Is it going to a concert in the park? Is it having a picnic? What is it that lights you up during this season, and using that as container to trust and receive that abundance is your birthright and that it's coming, knowing that you've been tending to these seeds in your work and in
Yeah.
your practice and in your community.
Yeah, I love that. And also, it's interesting because you mentioned flowering, right? Happens in spring. And for a lot of fruit trees, I think of like the orange tree. The orange blossom comes first, it blooms in spring, but the orange itself is not grown on the tree until November. So,
Mm,
like, it has to get all the way through summer between the
mhm,
bloom to the fruit before you can reap anything, and
mhm,
in the time in between, like you said, we're watering the soil, we're tending to the trees, like we're doing what we can to protect them from pests and from,
mhm,
these things that could damage the eventual fruit. And it's interesting too because, ancient cultures have always known this. Summer has been, think about like the summer solstice, like in pagan tradition. The summer solstice is about strength and growth and success and wealth. And it's about like fertility and the connection between the natural world and the spiritual realm. And it's an opportunity to really drop in community and kind of celebrate a collective blooming, right? And so thinking about receiving and about summer being an invitation to be with what has grown. This might look like joy and clarity, but it can also come with grief and with endings, right? There's kind of a bittersweet nature to summer. A prime example when the school year ends for summer. And there is kind of that ache, like you were mentioning before, there is kind of a nostalgia to summer because it does come
mhm,
with these complicated mixed emotions. I would even argue more so than any other season. Like summer has
mhm.
both those painful, sad, heartfelt endings and those beautiful new beginnings and that funny little space in
Totally.
between, right?
Yeah, totally.
And I'm wondering like how can we reframe slowness so that it's not seen so much as like passive or endings as something that's painful, but more receiving, like a reception, right?
Mhm.
How does that resonate for you, especially since you're moving out of like your previous era, like your summer, you've
Yeah,
shifted timelines in such a huge way. So how does that resonate for you?
totally. Yeah, I've been really exploring this, and I love how you said that, the like, school years end, and I do remember that, signing the yearbooks and
Yes,
going
that's what I
around
was
to all your
thinking.
friends and being like, "Oh, I'm gonna miss you, and what are you doing
Yeah.
this summer?"
And you don't know
But
if
at the
your
same
friendships are
time,
right, you don't know if the friendship is gonna have changed in that painful time. I don't wanna use, like, necessarily painful, but that time in between saying goodbye and seeing each other again, like, you have to just sit with that, you know what I mean? And wonder if things are gonna
yeah.
change.
And even what's coming through is like how many of us experienced this, or I feel like it's also just kind of like a narrative around summer. It's like you go away for a summer and you come back and you look totally different. It's like development and change, and anything can happen, I feel like, in that window. And so
Yeah.
I I love that, like being able to kind of throttle both sides of that, of like
Yeah.
or straddle, excuse me, both sides of that, of the ending and the beginning of something, and knowing,
Yeah.
like being comfortable and safe in your body to be in that and be
Yeah.
and trusting and like holding both of those experiences.
What's been
And
bringing you comfort as you've been moving through, like, this kind of energy? Where have you found like, for the people who are in those painful endings that, have the summer's glow to them, what's been bringing you comfort in that?
yeah, well, I think, even going back to like that transition from school into summer, it's like knowing that on the other end of this transition is the unknown, and
Yeah.
anything is possible in the unknown, and which requires a reorientation around the unknown as this like exciting, beautiful, infinite container, versus being so oriented on the past and all the things that you're going to miss and all the things you're going to lose and all the things that are changing, like orienting towards this is a time of magic. This is the time to step courageously towards what is most aligned,
Yeah.
because it's like we're slowing down, but there's so much movement. The sun is at its peak, the days are longer. So
Mhm.
anything can happen, anything can connect with you. And it feels like you can quantum leap to where you're trying to get
Yeah.
in this season. And so the receiving, I think for me, it goes so much more into prioritizing nourishment,
I
and
love.
like on every level of that,
Mhm.
really tuning into what our bodies are craving to be fed in this time, and that nourishment of like, what is it that I'm that I'm being pulled to do? Where am I being pulled to? How am I being pulled to spend my time in this season? Like, do I want to, be outside and lay on the rocks near the river, or do I want to go on a
Always.
hike, or do I want to, yeah, or always I'm a lizard, or always, or like, do I want to spend, have dinner outside with my friends and have them over to the patio? What is it that feels the most nourishing to me, and how can I really be in that and receive that?
Yeah, and it's very like strong feminine energy, right? To be in that receiving space.
Mm.
What I'm hearing is that it's about, not grasping, not necessarily striving. And it brings me back to the gardening metaphor that we mentioned where, when the ground is like drumming beneath you because these plants are coming through and up, there's anything that could connect with the possibilities
Mm.
of the fertile
Mhm.
ground that you're standing on, right? I empathize with anyone who feels like, well, spring was really challenging. I didn't really get to put effort forward. I didn't get to lean into like planting seeds. I didn't get to do these things. I'm wondering what advice we have for anyone who's in that place where they're like, well, I don't expect my summer to be abundant because I was kind of in a stuck place during the past
Mm.
season. And I wonder where the reframe opportunity is. Yeah, go ahead. I see your eyes
Yeah.
light up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess what comes up for me is like we're always planting seeds,
Mhm, mhm.
intentionally planting it is one thing, but
Yeah,
trusting that seeds are being planted or seeds have been planted or seeds from, any point in your journey are still there, like seeding their roots, like they're still there. I just
yeah.
I think reorienting around that and trusting, well, if I didn't have time to get on my knees and into my garden myself, then the wind has blown seeds into my garden
Yeah.
and those are planting,
I love
you know?
that way of putting it so much because you're so right. Like it's like no matter where you are right now, no matter how you spent your spring, what's been happening, what's been coming up for you, the question ultimately boils down to what are you being asked to receive this summer, right? And if you
Mhm.
don't feel like you yourself were, ultra productive and like did all these things, like asking
Mhm.
ourselves, well, why am I, telling myself that that's the way things should be? What is the truth here? What is
Mhm.
the alternate perspective? What is it that I'm uniquely and as me being asked to receive? You're still being given an opportunity to deepen your self-worth and to really lean into, receiving unconditional love from yourself and saying like hustle culture is not going to get me this time. It's not going to win this time. And like you
Yeah,
said, just trusting that even if you weren't the one putting forth maximum effort, which no one can and all at all times,
yeah.
there's still something that you're being asked to receive with the energetics of summer.
Yeah, and I think if you can reorient around like, well, am I willing to receive like am I believing that because my spring was maybe I was in a harder place or grieving that
Yeah.
I then don't am unable to receive anything in summer, maybe I don't deserve to receive anything in
Oh,
summer,
yes.
like reorienting around abundance is our birthright. Abundance is my like inherent way of being, whether it be seeds are blown into my garden or my neighbor's tree is overflowing and fruits falling into my garden, like not necessarily knowing how the fruit's going to show up and or needing to know, but trusting that this is a container of magic and it's your inherent birthright to receive. Something special happens when we step away from the noise of everyday life and into a space of amplified presence and deep devotion to our spiritual growth. A space where we're seen, supported, and reminded of the light within us. That is exactly what you'll have the chance to do on our Soul Pod retreat. We are so excited to invite you on this 4-day immersion in Joshua Tree, California, August 28th through 31st, specifically designed to illuminate your path and harness the light within. From guided meditations under the stars to transformative breathwork journeys, this is more than a retreat. It's a portal into the next level of you. You'll be held in a sacred container with like-minded souls, moving from the earthly into the mystical, expanding your intuition, deepening into your purpose, and activating your true energetic potential. If you're ready to dive into the mystical with us, join Crystal, myself, and the amazing SoulPod team in the desert, under the stars, in the stillness, and beyond the veil. Head to www.soulpodapp.com/retreat to learn more and book your alignment call. Spaces are limited to just 12 light beings for this journey. So if you feel the call, listen.
No, I love that you brought that up because I think also there's a point to be made around slowing down being an opportunity to reveal what is already blooming, and I think a lot of times when we're struggling with deservingness, we have a hard time with the slowing down part that does come with summer. That can look like, your coworkers are out of town and things are moving at a different speed than they were before, or maybe you're traveling and so things are not moving at the same speed. But there is an element of deservingness that summer is forcing us to reckon with and to see, okay, what is it that my soul is uniquely craving? Do I feel worthy of that? And if I don't feel like I can, lean into trust here, what's keeping me from doing that? Where am I thinking that I have to be X, Y, and Z in order to have the thing that I'm hoping to create in this lifetime? And that really brings us into the conversation around cultivation versus control. Because summer, it's not asking us to start over. It's asking us to tend to, like you said, what is already in motion and letting go of that urgency, nurturing what's here. What practices do you think people can lean on, and what opportunities are there to deepen like relationships, projects, healing paths that have already begun?
Yeah, what's coming through is kind of like what I mentioned earlier, where, in my garden, so example, I planted tomatoes. And again, noticing the urgency that exists within me of like, okay, so when am I going to have a tomato to pluck, and
Yeah.
bring into the kitchen? And really, first of all, noticing and checking that. And like the more that I tend to it, seeing that it is incrementally growing, like it does blow my mind. I'm like, it's bigger and there are more leaves,
Yeah.
and knowing that there's a, invisible blueprint for this tomato stalk or plant, whatever. There's an invisible blueprint, like it knows from the moment that it's planted that it's going to sprout into a tomato plant and there will be tomatoes. So I think keeping that in mind for me is like knowing that there's an invisible life cycle happening with
Mhm.
all of the seeds that we've planted, or with all of the, and again, even if they're not our seeds, like what is meant for us, like it is going to come to fruition,
I
so
love this idea. I love the idea of an
is this
existing
making
blueprint.
sense? I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm trying to bring my visualization, articulate it clearly, but it's like where the tomato plant's going to grow, how tall it's going to be, how many fruits it's going to bear, given that I water it and expose it, all those variables, given that I do
Yeah.
that, it knows how tall it's going to be, it already exists that it's
Yeah.
going to be X tall and produce X amount of tomatoes. And so I feel that in summer. It's like the extension of what we've tended to over the last 6 months of this year, it already exists. Like the extension of it already exists. And although there are infinite permutations of what can happen, the highest iteration of that already exists. And if we're willing to make ourselves available to connect with that, then it can't miss us, And so the practices that make ourselves available to connect with that are the things that hone that discernment. So, meditation, obviously, as we are on the Soul Podcast, meditation and practices that bring you into stillness. And I will say, I'll even call myself out. I notice in summer my resistance to like sitting is so much greater. So
Right?
I'm
It's so true. It's like it's so much harder to sit still in summer, but it is so essential that we do to create
so
that spaciousness.
essential.
Yeah.
Yes, and to tune into everything that we've spoken about thus far, and to take inventory of where we're overexerting and where we're missing the gift. So if anyone else is feeling resistance, you're not alone. And it's more
Um,
so the way I've kind of been working with that is like, okay, maybe sitting down for 20 minutes feels excruciating today, but I'm going to do 11, or I'm going to sit down and take 10 deep belly breaths and exhales and just do a little bit of breath work. And then if I feel like doing more, I will, but just something,
yeah.
instead of being so rigid with the practices. I think right now, again, if anyone else is feeling what I'm feeling, that might be helpful. And also, I think kind of what we mentioned earlier, that pull towards water and that cleansing effect
Yeah.
of bodies of water. If you're near a lake, if you're near a river, if you're near the ocean, even just cold showers in summer to like,
Mhm.
regulate your body temperature, whatever it is you have access to, but just that taking advantage of that cleansing so that you can, what it does for me is like every time I get in a body of water, when I get out, I'm just like clear.
Yes.
So much
Yeah.
more close to truth and to, that clarity, what we're working to hone in our discernment. And so, plunging into cold bodies of water is a practice. Like harvesting, if you have a garden, from there, and like being in touch with that practice of watching the blooming and watching the ripening of fruit. But those are the ones that are coming through for me. What are some for you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing that I do think about is going back to the tomato and the blueprint, right, that this plant has. I do also want to go there for a second and think
Yeah.
about what about in the situation where you are tending to your garden and something happens and it doesn't fruit and,
Mm.
it maybe withers and dies off, or pests get to it, or whatever the
Mhm.
thing may be. That's always a possibility. That's always entirely possible that
Totally.
that's the blueprint meant for that tomato plant. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
always where it
Yeah.
was going to go, is to become like fertilizer.
Uh-huh.
And when I think about that, I still think about how sacred just the practice of gardening still is. You know what I mean? Like your
Yeah.
efforts are never going to be wasted, even if nothing comes from it. The app is going to have transformed in a huge
Yeah.
way, and there's going to be insane amounts of value added to it. We're all very excited. We're very proud of it. And yet, if nothing, no excitement is generated from this launch, that is heartbreaking. And that is kind of also like an inevitable energetic of summer, right? Is that
Totally.
sometimes all it was about was that savoring and that depth and that effort that we put towards something. There's also still a very survivally linked aspect to it where, we historically, all if that were to happen, that meant a village was hungry. That meant a lot of people were scared for winter to come. And I'm bringing this up only to say, like, the act of summer is not just getting to that fruit and getting to the abundance. It's also recognizing that every day that you allow yourself to slow down and be still and be in your practice, you're creating spaciousness to bloom regardless of outcome. You're creating spaciousness to grow regardless of outcome. And really, like, working with that energy is so powerful, to say, how much can I slow down and be present despite the busyness and the generation and the things that are coming up through the ground? How much can I just be fully present in this practice and
Mhm.
savor the very act of creating, not for outcome, but for me, you know? And I
Mhm.
think that's also why summer is really the time when we all want to, like, I don't know about you, but I've been feeling called to like get into pottery and like do these things that are just solely because I want a practice. And I feel like
Yeah.
that also brings us into the shadow side of summer, which I
Mhm.
want to touch on. Burnout, overexposure, false radiance, the whole like idea of bikini body, and like all of this
Yeah.
pressure that we put on summer that says like I have to be in this given state in order to
Mhm.
really enjoy my summer. And that's so antithetical to what this season is about, which is about stillness and presence and slowness, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I just wanted to touch on real quick that like when summer energy becomes distorted and how we tend to overextend and override our own needs. And I'm wondering how that's come up for you. And burnout, I feel like, is especially prevalent in summer. What are your thoughts?
Totally. Yeah, I think this is so interesting. I feel like I've never really thought of the shadow aspect of summer, until
Yeah.
this conversation. And it's so true. There's shadow aspects to every season. I think
Right.
about winter and it's like how easily I can become
Oh my God.
overly
Yeah.
hermetic and
Yeah.
just
I've
like
been eaten alive
isolate.
by winter's shadow before.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, our Scorpio moon is just easy.
Yeah.
But as we, talk about summer and I think about how it's such a clear like parallel between even just overexertion and overexposure. Like you think about how many people experience intense like sunburns
Yeah.
and aren't like taking the proper care of their vessel, and myself included. Like I spent most of my life getting extremely sunburned
Same.
summer and just being
Because
like,
I didn't know
whoops.
my limits. I was like, no, let's push past them, you know?
Yeah, totally. And as I think about that, I'm like, it feels like this I'm out of touch with moderation when that happens, because
Mm.
I'm like, oh, the sun's here. It's been so long. I just want all of it. I just want to like sit and roast in the sun for hours and hours and hours on end versus having the wherewithal of like, okay, this is a good amount. This is an energizing amount. More than this is actually inhibiting me from like expressing myself fully.
Yeah.
And I even think going back to the garden as you're talking about things that don't flourish, their blueprint is to not flourish. I'm experiencing that with some of the things I planted too. I'm like, okay, so
Gosh.
like basil's not really popping off. Like there's some
Yeah.
brown leaves on this one. Like what
Yeah.
and being able to kind of walk through my garden and diagnose and tend to like the specific needs of each individual plant and species and how maybe this one's in too much sun, maybe this one's in too much shade, and knowing that there is a specific recipe for that each blossom, each bloom requires of us. And so
Yeah.
I think as we are in summer, like being able to turn up that awareness and notice like, okay, what is the formula for me in
Yeah.
this season? Like how much, whether that be like how much output I feel called to create, how much socializing feels good, like really tuning into your unique formula in this season of when you're approaching burnout, when you're approaching that sunburn and being like, no, it's time for me to get out of the sun, to sit in the
Yeah.
shade and trust that I'll be able to get more sun tomorrow. Like I don't
Yeah.
need to have it all today. I don't
Yeah.
need to eat the whole chocolate cake right now. I can just have exactly what feels good in this moment. And so the more I don't know, the more we play with this and like pull the threads of this conversation, I feel like a lot of it is an invitation to that as well, like
Yeah.
exploring moderation, exploring, being so in your body that you can listen to those that communication of like, that's a good amount. More than this isn't going to benefit us anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah, and just giving ourselves permission to, like you've mentioned, there is that impetus to keep going, to keep,
Yeah.
producing, to maintain the same momentum as you might have had in coming into spring or even just a few weeks ago, like earlier in
Yeah.
summer. And yeah, again, just coming back to that permission to bask, to move slower, and to trust that in choosing nourishment and choosing and really honing in on your specific recipe and formula, that it's going to produce the highest abundance in this
Yes.
season for you, and it's not going to look like anybody else's. Like maybe it's not a trip to Europe for you, maybe it's very simple, just like hitting the river every now and then,
Yeah.
whatever it is, like, but just trusting that your season is specifically meant to be yours. And so like listening to that.
Yeah, I love the energetic around moderation. I feel like summer especially, even more so than the other seasons, demands moderation of us.
Mhm.
And it's kind of a beautiful metaphor to think about too, where it's like, well, if you're being given all of this sunlight, are you able to pace yourself? Are you able to
Yeah.
find that moderation? And it really is about what we talked about before, which is deservingness and knowing that you can moderate. You don't have to indulge, indulge, indulge. You don't have to
Mhm.
fully fall into that. You can tune into moderation in summer, and you might find even more profound breakthroughs and realizations in allowing yourself stillness just as much as exertion and experiencing, right?
Mhm.
And I also think about how the ego gets attached to outward performance and to, like we mentioned before, like bikini body and all of these things.
Yeah.
And like, how do I show up on Instagram as like I'm doing something cool, and how it almost feels like, oh, if like you're wasting your summer if you're not
Yeah.
putting forth this like outward performance. And I think really what we want to invite people to examine here is, where are we performing instead of receiving, and really getting back into the energetics of moderation and of receiving, knowing that the level of abundance that you experience this summer is part of your unique growth blueprint. And anything
Mhm.
that doesn't happen that you wanted to happen, well, okay, let's examine where my deservingness is around this and where I might not have been willing to fully step into my truest self worth in order to make this happen for myself. And now I have 4 seasons ahead of me where I can align myself with that reality that I
Yeah,
envision, that I feel like I didn't fully get to experience. Not in a egoic way, in a performative way, but in a opportunity to look at the gaps in where abundance didn't meet you in the way that you wanted it to, because summer is naturally abundant. It is going to do that. But
totally.
wherever there is like a lack feeling might be an opportunity to expand into who you truly want to show up as, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
what's coming up is, again, this garden analogy really just hitting home.
Yeah.
But that yeah, it's like there's such a learning curve to it. Like I mentioned, some of them aren't thriving, some of them are thriving. And so in that part of your life being like, okay, where am I potentially overwatering? Where am I
Yes,
exposing too much to the
exactly.
sun? Like,
Wow,
this
that
is what I
gardening
want.
metaphor.
Just so many angles it just hits.
Keep coming.
But it's like, okay, so I
True.
want to get here, and this is what I'm doing, and this is what it feels like what's not working. This is what is, okay, so where taking inventory of how you're tending to that specific plant of your garden, your career, your
Yeah.
relationship, each one, it's like its own little planter box, and being like, okay, so maybe I'm overwatering this. What's that mean? What's that look like? And
Yes. Maybe I'm putting it in
dissecting
too
that
much
metaphor for
sun.
you.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so treating each part of your life the same way, like it's not
Yeah.
going to work. You have to tend to each facet of your life, each facet of yourself, like all of the many roles and fragments of ourself differently as well. And knowing that, I feel like, is, again, it's like that permission slip to be like, oh, okay, like I'm not doing anything wrong. I didn't know that basil needs less space. I didn't know that mint can go in and consume all of the roots of the plants
Yeah.
underneath it. I didn't know I'm learning. It's like
Yeah.
reorienting around this season as a like learning opportunity to see what creates the most nourishment and thus the most abundance.
Yeah.
And I like want to double click on this again, of just, which has been basically the whole conversation, but that, like, choosing our highest alignment, like choosing what feels most authentic for us, is going to create the most abundance. Like, I just
Yes.
think there's so much fear
I agree.
rhetoric that points to the opposite, especially like if you're in this in between, or you're in between, like you're feeling like the job you're at isn't really right, the right
Mhm.
fit, or where you live might be like not totally aligned. Just instead of entertaining or feeding the fear of,
Mhm.
"Well, what am I going to do? It's not a great economy," or it's so like, where am I going to da, 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 all of the stuff that comes in, instead of feeding that, knowing that this is the time to
Yeah.
trust in magic, to trust that in choosing what's most aligned for you, like this is one of the most magnetic times, it feels like, to
Yeah. I
do
agree.
that, and to double down on trust and be like, okay, fine, like I and really just meet the fear with more aliveness, with more
Yes.
like, with more of your unwavering trust and surrender. Like, no, I
Yeah.
know, if this is what I believe, if this is the truth that I believe, like the philosophy of the universe runs on, everything that we speak about at SoulPod, then this is the time to put that into motion, and to really trust that and lean
Yeah.
into that and be like, okay, well then I trust abundance is following me, is falling into my garden.
Yes, a friggin' man. I almost want to invite everyone into like a weekly like harvest ritual, like a harvest check, not
Mm.
necessarily like digging
Yeah.
up the seeds and checking, but just looking at, like you mentioned, like looking at what parts of my life is withering in the sun, which parts are being
Mhm.
overwatered, which parts are needing more fertile soil. Or just kind of checking in throughout the summer with, because it's such an opportunity to slow down and savor, just checking in with those different facets of your life and seeing, okay, am I on track to a bountiful
Mhm.
harvest? And if that doesn't feel true, then where do I want to tweak it? Right.
Mhm.
And yeah, and just to close us out, looking at what's already growing in your life that you haven't fully received yet. Is it maybe there's a level of deservingness there? Is there a level of not feeling good enough for it? Is there some way that maybe it's being suffocated out because it's overgrown with weeds,
Mhm.
Looking at what is growing in your life that requires patience versus a little more effort. Where do you feel that you might not be fully in a place of alignment with it yet? And what can we do to invite in spaciousness and invite in clarity and see maybe there are other ways that these areas need to be tended to?
Mhm.
So that's a little closing practice to leave you all with
Yeah.
as we move through this summer energy.
Beautiful. I love that. A
Yeah.
harvesting practice.
A
That's
harvest week,
lovely.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if you all have any questions, send us what's coming up for you. We'd love to hear how your summer is going. If it's not summer where you are right now, send us what's coming up for you, what season you're in. You can
Mhm.
text us via the link in the show notes. We love to hear from you. And we'll see you over in SoulPod in the app with its newest updates.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kat. Bye.
Thank you for journeying with us today, Light Being. We hope you enjoyed the episode. And before you go, we want to invite you to explore the SoulPod app, where you can immerse yourself in daily lessons, guided meditations, and breath work to develop a soul nourishing daily ritual and tune back into your own inner guidance system. You can download SoulPod in the App Store or directly from the show notes to start your free trial today and awaken the ancient wisdom within you.